Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tanner Reviews the World. And on today's episode, we are looking at yet another book. I've been home for about a week now on spring break, and I've had a lot of time on my hands. So naturally, whenever I have a lot of time on my hands, I like to get a book out of the way. And in choosing my books this spring break, I decided to pick one that was interesting, also pretty nostalgic from my childhood, or at least from my early high school years, and something I thought would be really good for the show. And so, today I chose Star Wars Tales of the Bounty Hunter. Now, whenever I was looking through my books, as I said, I came across this one, and I remember reading it, I think like in my freshman or sophomore year of high school. And I remember the stories pretty well, and I always liked Star Wars for the fact that the fan base behind Star Wars, they agree on the fact that Star Wars is awesome. They also pretty much agree on the fact that A New Hope was probably the best Star Wars movie, and Phantom Menace was the worst Star Wars movie, and disputably probably the worst thing to come out of the entire franchise. But other than that, everything else Star Wars fans seem to argue about, and a lot of the argument comes from Expanded Universe. And I really like the fact that a lot of Star Wars fans love Expanded Universe. Other ones completely reject Expanded Universe altogether. And it makes for a really interesting concept, which I don't really see a whole lot of in other science fiction storylines, with the exception of Star Trek. But you know, Star Trek's a little different because Star Trek was originally a TV show and Star Wars was a movie, so you have two completely different arguments going on there. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I'm a fan of the movies. I'm also I've dabbled in the expanded universe, you know, namely books like Tales of the Bounty Hunter, a couple other ones. Haven't gotten too far into them, but you know, I've from what I have gotten in from Expanded Universe, it's definitely a hit and miss kind of thing. It really depends on who's writing this stuff, or who's coming up with this stuff as far as comic books, video games, and the books are concerned. Um, and I remember Tales of the Bounty Hunter. This one was definitely one of the better Expanded Universes. And also, I find it very interesting that whenever it comes to Expanded Universe, these bounty hunters, with the exception of Boba Fett, share, I think, about 30 seconds of screen time as far as the movies are concerned. And out of all that, they get an entire book dedicated to them. And that's just one of the things that I do love about Star Wars to that regard. Um, but yeah, as we're getting into the book here, I'm not going to try to give too much away because, as I said with my other book reviews, that I don't like to give away too much of a book because you really have to invest a lot of time and effort into reading a book instead of a movie, which usually takes about 90 minutes to, you know, 2.5 hours most of the time. Um, but yeah, as far as Expanded Universe is concerned, this is definitely one of the stronger of the Expanded Universe series. Tales of the Bounty Hunter. It really kind of delves into these six bounty hunters, and you really get to know them really well through this story. Um, as far as what's good and what's bad about the book, the funny thing is that all the books in this one, there's I think there's six in all. All the ones in this book, they're all pretty strong actually. They all did a pretty good job of at least telling a story. There was no real um, huge plot holes. There wasn't any huge continuity errors that I saw as a casual Star Wars fan. As far as the best one is concerned, I say the best story has to be the story of Boba Fett, which is by Daniel Keyes Moran. Yeah, I think that's Moran. But this is definitely a really strong book, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going to try to, but this actually I think is common knowledge, and I'm not giving much away here. This is actually the book that brought Boba Fett back to life as far as the expanded universe is concerned, because after Return of the Jedi, as everyone knows who's seen the movie, Boba Fett does get eaten by the Sarlacc pit, and it is in this book that brings Boba Fett back to life as being the only person to ever escape from the Sarlacc pit. And I don't think I'm giving a whole lot away here. I mean, it is a spoiler, but I'm not giving too much away as far as the story is concerned, because it has become pretty common knowledge that Boba Fett escaped the Sarlacc pit in some regard. And I think, and I just want to specify that this is the book that does that, and it does it in a really well in a very plausible scenario. And I just really liked the Boba Fett story, just from the ways that the way that it approached it, the way that it looked at it, and the way that it looked at Boba Fett's current situation, how royally fucked he was at that moment, and then coming back and defying the odds, if you will, in traditional Boba Fett character style, and it's a very, very interesting story. As far as the other ones are concerned, there's not really one that sets them apart from the pack. They're all pretty standard. They're all written really well. They're all give very interesting details into these bounty hunters' lives after they go after their hunt for Han Solo. As far as, like, there's no really bad or worst. There is the one that I thought that was the least successful out of the other bounty hunters in this story was the story of IG-88. And IG-88, the story was written by the person who edited this book, Kevin J. Anderson. And as far as the story of IG-88 is concerned, it reads very well. It's very well paced. It's there's no points that drag. There's no huge continuity issues as far as connecting IG-88 story to the movies at large. The problem that I have with this one, and once again, usually if you start to kind of sense a pattern with me, is that the things that really start to annoy me about a certain something is just these little things that I just can't, get around. And this is the case with the IG-88 story. And this is one I'm not going to give away what exactly is the problem with the IG-88 story. I'm not going to get into detail. But what I'm going to explain about this is that the IG-88 story, albeit a well-written story, albeit a interesting story, the concept alone was just so far-fetched, in my opinion, that I just couldn't get behind it. It was just so out there on actually what it was presenting me with that I just looked at that and said, there's no way that this could really be happening in the Star Wars universe. The huge climax, which was a very interesting climax, but at the same time, whenever I'm reading this and seeing like these things that are going on in the Star Wars universe, I'm still saying I have to call bullshit on it because it just doesn't seem to fit. The story of IG-88 and its other forms, IG-88A, IG-88B, C, and D, what all they did, it just doesn't feel plausible. It just doesn't. It gets beyond the point, and it really affects the movie, especially Return of the Jedi. Because if you read this story and then you watch Return of the Jedi, you have this kind of retcon in the back of your head whenever you're watching the movie, and you know how this story's affecting it, and you're just like, you know what, I just can't believe this. It's just not fitting. So, as far as the weakest aspect of this book, it has to be the IG-88 story, just because the concept behind the story is just so far-fetched that it's just so hard for a fan to believe. But, overall, this book is actually really good. And I can actually recommend this book to people who are not fans of Star Wars. I mean, if you're just avidly despise Star Wars, yeah, don't read this. But if you're just an occasional reader, maybe you're looking for a book to read for because you have nothing better to do for a week or a couple hours out of your day, I mean, pick it up. You'll be entertained. If you don't know anything about Star Wars, it really doesn't matter because you still have very enjoyable stories about these bounty hunters, and you really get into their character, who they are, and what they do, and it's just a really enjoyable read altogether, whether you're a Star Wars fan or whether you're not a Star Wars fan. So overall, on my scale of 1 to 5, I have to give Star Wars Tales of the Bounty Hunters a 4. It is a very good read, and I recommend it to most anybody out there, unless you're just an extreme, like, have an extreme hatred for the Star Wars series. But that is it for me on this book review, and until then, I'll see you next time.